The Thraxian warship descended through the clouds of Varathfor like a blade cutting through silk, its dark hull blocking out the pale morning sun as it hovered above the small human research outpost known as Kira Station. Commander Zethral stood at the bridge viewport, his four eyes narrowing as he studied the tiny cluster of buildings surrounded by endless jungle. And a cold smile crossed his gray face as he counted the structures below. 16 buildings, he said to his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vrex, who stood nervously behind him. And our scans show only 16 life signs inside them. Rex shifted his weight from one clawed foot to the other, his scales rippling with unease as he looked at the dense green jungle that surrounded the outpost on all sides. Commander, the reports about this moon are troubling, Rex said quietly. The survey teams we sent last year never returned, and the ones before that came back changed somehow. Unable to speak of what they saw in those trees, Zethral waved a dismissive hand and turned away from the viewport. Superstition and weakness, he declared. We are the elite forces of the Thraxian Empire, and we do not fear trees or the primitive beasts that live among them. He activated the ship-wide communication system and spoke in a voice that carried to every soldier aboard. All units prepare for deployment. And remember, our mission here is simple. The humans have spent 6 years studying the apex predators of this world, creatures called the Corvith. And we will take that research so our scientists can turn these beasts into weapons for the Empire. 200 Thraxian soldiers assembled in the landing bays, checking their weapons and armor as the ship lowered toward the ground inside Kira Station. Alarms blared through every corridor as Dr. Laura Bennett ran toward the command center, her boots pounding against the metal floor. She was 34 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her white research coat was stained with soil and plant matter from her morning work in the jungle. Danny Holt met her at the command center door, his young face tight with worry as he gripped his security rifle. He was 26, one of 4 security officers assigned to protect the outpost. And right now he looked very much like someone who understood how badly they were outnumbered. Thraxian warship. Dr. Bennett, he reported. At least 200 soldiers from what our scans can tell. And they are already deploying landing craft. Laura moved past him to the main console and studied the sensor readings with calm eyes that betrayed none of the fear she felt. Inside, where are the others? She asked. I sent Martinez and Cooper to secure the research labs. And Nguyen is gathering everyone in the main shelter, Danny answered. But Dr. Bennett, we have 16 people and 4 guns against 200 Thraxian soldiers. I know the math. Danny, the communication console crackled to life, and a harsh voice filled the room. Human outpost. This is Commander Zethral of the Thraxian Imperial Forces, the voice announced. You will surrender all research data regarding the Corvith species immediately, and you will hand over the lead researcher who's been studying these creatures. Laura pressed the response button and spoke in a steady voice. This is Dr. Laura Bennett, lead xenobiologist of Kira Station, and I am refusing your demands. Our research is protected under Galactic Science Accords, and you have no authority here. A cold laugh came through the speakers. Human, the Galactic Science Accords mean nothing to the Thraxian Empire, and you have no military presence capable of stopping us. Surrender now, or we will take what we want by force. The transmission ended, and Danny looked at Laura with desperate eyes. Evacuation shuttles are 3 hours away at best, he said. There is no way we can hold them off that long. Laura stood very still, her mind racing through possibilities as she stared at the sensor display showing Thraxian soldiers spreading out around the outpost. She thought about the 6 years she had spent on this moon, the countless hours she had walked through that jungle, the relationships she had built with creatures that most scientists considered nothing more than mindless killers. Danny, Get everyone to the shelter and seal the doors, she said finally, her voice strange and distant. What are you going to do? Lavra pulled off her research coat and tossed it aside, revealing the simple clothes she wore beneath. She removed her identification badge and set it on the console, then turned toward the door that led outside. Dr. Bennett, you cannot go out there. Danny grabbed her arm, his face pale with fear. They will kill you or take you prisoner. Lavra looked at him with eyes that held a depth he had never seen before, a knowledge of something he could not understand. They want the Corvus research, she said softly, and they do not understand that I am the research. 6 years, Danny. 6 years I have walked among those creatures, and in all that time they have never harmed me while they have killed every other being that entered their territory. That does not mean. It means everything. Lavra interrupted gently. The Thraxians think they can take data files and learn to control the Corvus. But you cannot control something by reading about it in a report. You can only earn trust through time and sacrifice and respect. She pulled her arm free and walked to the exterior door. Tell the others to stay hidden and wait for the evacuation shuttles, she said without looking back. And whatever happens, do not come looking for me, Lavra, please. But she was already opening the door, stepping out into the humid air as the first Thraxian soldiers appeared at the outpost. Perimeter Danny watched through the window as she walked calmly past the startled aliens who raised their weapons but did not fire. Confused by this single unarmed human woman who showed no fear, she walked past the storage buildings and the communication tower, her stride never slowing as she approached the edge of the jungle. Commander Zethral's voice boomed from a speaker mounted on one of the landing craft. Stop that human! Capture her immediately. Soldiers rushed forward, but Lavra had already reached the tree line. She stepped between two massive trunks and disappeared into the shadows. Without a single glance behind her, the Thraxians stopped at the jungle edge, staring into the darkness where the human woman had vanished. None of them were willing to follow inside the command center. Danny Holt pressed his hand against the window and whispered words he knew she could not hear. What have you done out there for 6 years, Lavra? What do you know that we do not? In the jungle, something moved in response to her presence. Massive shapes shifting in the shadows as she walked deeper into the green darkness, and somewhere far from human ears, a sound began to build. Low at first, then growing. The rumble of a predator. Recognizing a familiar scent, Laura Bennett smiled as she walked toward the sound, toward the only allies who could save her people from the army that had come to take everything she had worked for. She was not afraid. She was going home. The Thraxian soldiers secured Kira Station within the hour, moving through each building with weapons raised and finding nothing but empty corridors and locked doors. Commander Zethral stood in the center of the outpost courtyard, his 4 eyes scanning the jungle that surrounded them on every side as his officers reported their findings. 15 humans captured and secured in the main shelter, Sub-Commander Vrex announced. But the woman who entered the jungle has not been found, and our soldiers refuse to pursue her into the trees. Zethral turned sharply, his scales bristling with anger. They refuse? Commander, the jungle is dense, and our sensors cannot penetrate more than 50 meters past the tree line, Vrex explained nervously. The men have heard the stories about what lives in there, and they remember what happened to our survey teams. Cowards, Zethral hissed. But he did not order them to follow even. He could feel something watching from those shadows. Something ancient and patient. And hungry, he turned his attention to more practical matters and ordered Danny Holt brought before him too. Soldiers dragged the young security officer into the courtyard and forced him to his knees. Thrall circled him slowly, studying the human with cold curiosity. You will tell me where the woman has gone, he commanded. Danny lifted his chin and met the commander's gaze without flinching. I do not know where she went. But I can tell you that you should not have come to this moon. Is that a threat, human?" "It is a warning," Danny said quietly, "and you should take it seriously." Zethral leaned closer, his breath hot against Danny's face. What is so special about this woman that she would walk into a jungle filled with apex predators without any weapon or protection? Danny was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant as if remembering something wonderful and terrifying at the same time. "She has been here for 6 years, he finally said. 6 years walking among creatures that have killed every other being who entered their territory. Do you understand what that means?" "It means she is lucky." "No, Commander." Danny shook his head slowly. "It means she is something else entirely. Something your empire has never encountered before." Zethral struck him across the face and ordered him taken back to the shelter with the others. But the human's words lingered in his mind as he stood alone in the courtyard, listening to the strange sounds that echoed from the jungle as darkness began to fall deep within those trees. Lara Bennett walked along paths that no scanner could detect, trails she had memorized over 6 years of patient exploration. The jungle of Vareth 4 was alive in ways that most scientists could never understand. It breathed and watched and remembered. And at its heart lived the Corvette. She remembered her first encounter with them as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. It had been 3 months after her arrival, when she had wandered too far from the outpost, so focused on collecting plant samples that she had not noticed the shadows gathering around her when she finally looked up. She found herself surrounded by 8-foot-tall creatures covered in dark scales, their yellow eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence as they studied this small, soft being who had entered their domain. Any other person would have run, and running would have meant death. But Lara had simply sat down on a fallen log, placed her hands in her lap, and waited. The Corvette had circled her for hours, sniffing the air, testing her scent, waiting for the fear that never came when the sun began to set. The largest of them, a massive male with a scar across his snout, had approached her slowly. Lara had remained perfectly still as he leaned close enough for her to feel his breath on her face, and then he had simply turned and walked away. And the others had followed. She had returned to that spot the next day, and the day after that, and every day for months. She learned their sounds and their gestures, the way they communicated through rumbles and clicks, and the position of their crests. She brought them gifts of food and water during the dry season when resources were scarce, when a sickness spread through their pack. She had risked her life to bring medicine from the outpost, treating their young ones while the adults watched with eyes that held something like gratitude. The scarred male, whom she came to call Rax, had been the first to truly accept her. She remembered the day he had allowed her to touch him, her small human hand resting against his massive scaled chest as he rumbled deep in his throat. From that day forward, she was no longer prey or curiosity. She was pack now. Lara emerged from the dense undergrowth into a clearing she knew well, a place where the Corvette gathered during the warm season. She made a call, a series of clicks and low growls that she had learned over countless hours of observation. The jungle went silent around her. Then the shadows began to move. They emerged from the trees one by one, massive shapes that would have sent any other being fleeing in terror. Their scales gleamed in the fading light, their yellow eyes fixed on the small human woman who stood without fear in the center of their gathering. Place. Lara counted them as they appeared. 20, then 30, then 40, and more. The entire pack had come. Last of all came Rax, larger than all the others, his scarred snout lifting to taste the air as he approached her. Lara spoke in their language, her voice carrying the rumbles and clicks she had practiced for years. "The sky enemies have come," she said. "They have taken our den and captured our family." Rax stopped before her, his enormous head lowering until his yellow eyes were level with hers. "They want to chain your children," Lara continued. "They want to make you slaves. a ripple passed through the gathered corveth, scales bristling and claws extending as they understood her words. Rax. S chest began to vibrate with a sound that started low and built into something that shook the very trees around them. Was not a roar of anger, but a call, a summoning, a declaration of war. The other corveth answered, their voices joining his until the jungle itself seemed to tremble with their fury back at Kira Station. The Thraxian soldiers stopped what they were doing as the sound reached them. It rolled out of the jungle like thunder, like the voice of the world itself rising in rage. Commander Zethril stood frozen in the courtyard, his four eyes wide as he listened to something he had never heard before. What is that? Rex whispered beside him. Zeth Roll did not answer because he had no answer to give in the shelter. Danny Holt heard the sound and closed his eyes. She did it, he murmured. And despite everything, he smiled. She actually did it, in the jungle clearing. Laura placed her hand on Rax's scarred snout and felt the vibration of his call beneath her palm. We protect each other, she said softly. That is what family does. Rax lowered his head even further, pressing his snout gently against her shoulder in a gesture of absolute trust and loyalty. Then, he turned toward the distant lights of the outpost, and the entire pack turned with him. Laura Bennett walked among monsters, and the monsters would follow her anywhere. Night fell over Kira Station like a heavy blanket, and with it came a silence that made every Thraxian soldier grip their weapon a little tighter. Commander Zethril had ordered the perimeter secured with motion sensors and floodlights, creating a ring of artificial day around the outpost that pushed back the darkness of the jungle. But darkness had a way of creeping back. Sub-Commander Vrex approached him with a datapad clutched in trembling claws, his scales pale with fear as he made his report. Commander, I have reviewed all available footage of the corveth species, he said, and what I have found is deeply concerning. Show me. Vrex activated the display, and images filled the screen. Footage from survey drones and helmet cameras. Recordings made by the teams that had come before them. Zethril watched as massive scaled creatures tore through Thraxian soldiers like they were made of paper, their movements impossibly fast for beings of their size, their yellow eyes gleaming with an intelligence that went far beyond simple animal instinct. In every recorded encounter, the corveth have demonstrated coordinated attack patterns, Rex explained. They flank their prey, they set ambush, they adapt to weapons and tactics they have never seen before. These are not mindless beasts, Commander. They are still just animals, with respect. Commander, I am not certain that is true. Rex lowered his voice. The survey teams reported that the corveth seemed to communicate with each other across great distances, that they appeared to make decisions as a group, that they showed mercy to those who did not fight back. Zethril turned away from the display with a dismissive snort. Mercy is weakness, and weakness does not survive in a predator species. Before Rex could respond, the communication device on his belt crackled with static. Command, this is Patrol 7. We have movement at the northern perimeter. Multiple contacts moving through the trees. They are staying just outside the sensor range. Zethril grabbed the device. How many contacts? Unknown, sir. They move too fast for visual confirmation, but we can hear them. There must be dozens of them circling our position. Another voice broke through on the channel, this one higher with panic. Command, this is Patrol 3 on the eastern side. We have the same situation here. Something is watching us from the jungle. Then Patrol 5 reported from the south, and Patrol 2 from the west. They were surrounded. Zithril's jaw tightened as he realized the implications. All units maintain position and do not fire unless directly engaged, he ordered. They are testing us, looking for weakness, and we will not give them any. An hour passed. Then, too, the soldiers on the perimeter reported shadows moving at the edge of the floodlights. Shapes that appeared for just a moment before vanishing back into darkness. Then Patrol 7 stopped responding. Zithral sent a squad to investigate and found all 6 soldiers still at their posts. Still standing, still breathing, but none of them would speak. Their eyes were wide and empty. Their bodies frozen in place as if they had seen something so terrifying that their minds had simply stopped working. The medic who examined them reported that their hearts were racing at dangerous speeds and their scales had turned gray with shock. What could do this? Rex whispered as they looked at the paralyzed soldiers. What could frighten trained warriors so badly that they cannot even move? Zethral had no answer. He ordered the affected soldiers taken to the medical bay and doubled the guards on every position. But he could feel the fear spreading through his troops like a disease in the shelter where the human prisoners were held. Danny Holt sat with his back against the wall and listened to the Thraxian guards outside. He could hear their voices, sharp with fear, arguing about what they had seen and what they should do. The other humans huddled around him. 15 researchers and support staff who had never expected to find themselves in the middle of an invasion. What is happening out there? Dejan Chast, her voice barely above a whisper. Danny allowed himself a small smile. Lavra is happening. You mean she is actually controlling those creatures? That is impossible, Danny. The Corvith are wild predators, and no human could possibly. I used to think the same thing, Danny interrupted gently. But I have seen her walk into that jungle 100 times, and she always comes back. I have seen her sit with those creatures like they were old friends, and I have heard her speak their language like she was born knowing it. He looked at the door, beyond which Thraxian soldiers paced with nervous steps. She told me once that the Corvith are not animals the way we think of animals. He continued. She said they have culture and family and loyalty, that they remember kindness and they remember cruelty, and that they choose who they trust. And they trust her? More than trust, Danny said. They follow her. I do not know what she did to earn that, but whatever happens tonight, I believe she will protect us. Outside, the power suddenly died. Every light in the outpost went dark at once, plunging the entire station into blackness so complete that the Thraxian soldiers could not see their own hands in front of their faces. Emergency lighting flickered on a moment later, casting everything in a dim red glow that created more shadows than it dispelled. Zithral ran to the command center and found the technicians working frantically at their consoles. What happened? The main power conduit was severed from outside. Commander, a technician reported. Something cut through it cleanly, but our external cameras saw nothing. Zethral felt a chill run down his spine. These creatures were not just circling them anymore. They had entered the outpost itself without being detected, struck at their power supply, and disappeared again. The Corvith were hunting them, but not the way animals hunt. They were hunting the way soldiers hunt, taking out infrastructure, creating fear, isolating their enemy piece by piece. Rex grabbed his arm suddenly, his claws digging in hard. Commander, look. Zethral followed his gaze to the wall of the command center in the red emergency light. A shadow moved across the surface. Something massive had passed by the window outside. Something that walked on 2 legs and stood taller than any Thraxian. Then another shadow passed, and another, and another. The Corvith were inside the perimeter. Zithral drew his weapon and turned toward the main door, just as it began to open slowly. Silently, pushed by a force outside, what stepped through was the largest creature he had ever seen. 8 feet of scaled muscle and gleaming teeth, yellow eyes that reflected the red light like twin fires. The Corvith did not attack, it simply stood there, staring at him with an intelligence that made his blood run cold. Then it stepped aside, creating a path between Zethral and the darkness beyond the door. It was an invitation, and it was a warning. Zithral stood frozen, his weapon raised but his finger unable to pull the trigger. as he realized that everything he thought he knew about this mission was wrong. Something was coming through that door, and whatever it was, the apex predators of Vareth 4 served it willingly. The red emergency lights painted everything in shades of blood as Commander Zethril stared at the massive Corvith blocking the doorway around him. His soldiers had gathered in the command center, their weapons raised and their bodies trembling as more of the creatures appeared at every window and entrance. There were dozens of them now, their yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness, their scales shifting with each breath. And not one of them made a sound. The silence was worse than any roar could have been. Then footsteps echoed from outside, soft and steady, the sound of something small, approaching through the corridor. That the Corvith had cleared. Zethril tightened his grip on his weapon and aimed it at the darkness beyond the door. A figure emerged from the shadows. Laura Bennett walked into the command center alone, her bare feet leaving muddy prints on the metal floor. She was covered in jungle soil and scratches, her hair tangled with leaves and her clothes torn in several places. She looked exhausted and fragile and entirely human, and she walked through a room full of armed Thraxian soldiers as if they did not exist. Every Corvith in the building turned to watch her, their massive heads tracking her movement with an attention that bordered on reverence. Laura stopped in the center of the room, directly between Zethril and the largest Corvith, and stood perfectly still with her hands at her sides. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Zethril laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the silent room. "This is what we have been running from?" he asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "One human female covered in mud? You think this frightens me?" Laura did not respond to his words. Instead, she turned to the Corvith surrounding them and spoke a single word in their language, a low growling sound that vibrated in her throat. Every Corvith in the room responded immediately. They lowered themselves to the ground, pressing their massive bodies against the floor and turning their heads to expose their throats. 200 combined years of hunting instinct, of apex predator dominance, of killing anything that threatened their territory. And they lay down before her like children before a mother. Zethril's laughter died in his throat. The soldiers behind him made sounds of shock and fear, their weapons wavering as they watched these terrible creatures submit completely to a single human woman. "What is this?" Rex whispered, his voice cracking with terror. "What are you?" Laura finally turned to face the Thraxians, her brown eyes meeting Zethril's without any trace of fear. "Your empire has a legend, Commander," she said, her voice calm and quiet in the sudden stillness. "The Vethric, the one who walks among beasts, the demon who commands monsters to do her bidding." Zethril's scales went pale. The Vethrak was a story told to Thraxian children, a tale of ancient terror, a myth that had frightened his species for thousands of years. "That is a story," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Nothing more than superstition. Stories come from somewhere," Laura replied, "and yours came from a truth that your ancestors witnessed and could not explain. A being that predators feared and followed, a creature that held power not through strength or weapons, but through something deeper." She gestured at the Corvith lying around them. "I am not your Vethrak, Commander. I am just a scientist who paid attention. I am just a human who understood something that your empire has forgotten." "And what is that?" "That true loyalty cannot be taken by force," Laura said. "It must be earned. I did not conquer these creatures, or threaten them, or trick them into following me. I lived among them, learned their ways, respected their culture, and when they needed help, I gave it without asking for anything in return." She walked closer to Zethril, and he found himself taking a step backward before he could stop himself. 6 years ago, a plague swept through their pack and killed half of their young, Laura continued. "I spent 3 months in this jungle treating sick Corvith, sleeping in their dens. risking my life every single day because I could not watch them suffer when I had the power to help. The largest Corvus, the one called Rax, rose from his position on the floor and moved to stand beside her. He towered over her small frame, his scarred snout barely a foot from her shoulder. And yet he positioned himself not as a protector, but as a companion. "I saved his children," Lavra said softly, reaching up to rest her hand against Rax's scales. "And he decided that I was worthy of his loyalty, not because I am strong or dangerous, but because I proved that I would die for his family." Rax's chest vibrated with a low rumble, and Lavra responded with a similar sound. A conversation happening in a language no Thraxian could understand. Then, Rax did something that made every soldier in the room freeze with fresh terror. He knelt this massive apex predator, this killing machine that had torn apart Thraxian warriors like they were nothing, lowered his body to the ground and pressed his scarred head beneath Laura's. Outstretched hand, it was not the submission of a beaten animal, it was the bow of a warrior. Honoring his commander, the other Corvus followed, every one of them shifting their position to face Lara, their yellow eyes fixed on her with absolute devotion. Zithral's weapon shook in his trembling hands. "This is impossible," he breathed. "No one can command apex predators. No one can make monsters kneel." "They are not monsters," Lavra replied, and there was steel in her voice now. "They are intelligent beings with families and honor and love. And they chose to follow me because I treated them as equals instead of animals to be conquered." She stepped forward again, and this time Zethral did not just step back. He stumbled, nearly falling over his own soldiers who were pressing against the walls in their desperation to get away from her. "Your empire wanted to study them so you could turn them into weapons," Lavra said. "You wanted to chain their minds and use their bodies to fight your wars. But they are not tools to be used, Commander. They are people, and now they are my people." She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to touch, and looked up into his 4 terrified eyes. "You have one chance to leave this moon," she said. "Take your soldiers and your ship and go back to your empire, and when you get there, you will deliver a message for me." Zethral could not speak. His throat was too tight with fear. "You will tell them that Vareth 4 is protected," Lavra continued. "You will tell them that any ship that comes here with hostile intentions will be met by creatures that fear nothing and serve a human who saved their children. You will tell them that we are not prey." She leaned closer, and her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "And you will tell them that if they ever come back, I will not be as merciful as I am being tonight." Behind her, Rax rose from his kneeling position and let out a sound that was not quite a roar. It was a promise. As Izral dropped his weapon, it clattered against the floor, and the sound seemed to break something in the other soldiers. Weapons fell from trembling hands all around the room as the Thraxian warriors surrendered to a human woman covered in mud. Laura Bennett stood among monsters, and the monsters waited for her word. The silence in the command center stretched on as Commander Zethral stood weaponless before the human woman who had brought an army of apex predators to kneel at her feet. His soldiers watched him with desperate eyes, waiting for an order, waiting for leadership, waiting for someone to tell them what to do when everything they believed about the galaxy had just been shattered. As Zithral looked at the Corvus surrounding them, at their yellow eyes that tracked every movement with patient intelligence, at their massive claws that could tear through Thraxian armor like cloth. Then he looked at Lara Bennett, this small human covered in mud and scratches, who stood before him without any weapon or armor or protection, and he understood something that his pride had been hiding from him since the moment he landed on this moon. He had already lost. "If I refuse your terms," he said slowly, testing the words even as he spoke them, "what will you do?" Lara tilted her head slightly, considering the question with the same calm she had shown throughout this entire confrontation. "I will not do anything, Commander," she replied. "But Rax and his pack will protect their territory the way they have protected it for thousands of years. They will not stop until every threat is eliminated." She paused, and something like sadness crossed her face. "I do not want that. I have never wanted death, not for you or your soldiers. That is why I'm giving you this chance to leave." Sub-Commander Rex stepped forward, his scales still pale with fear, but his voice steady. "Commander, we should accept our terms. We have already lost a dozen soldiers to paralysis. Our power systems have been destroyed, and we have no way of knowing how many of these creatures are still hiding in the jungle. This mission is over. The Empire does not retreat." Another officer shouted from the back of the room. Laura looked past Zethral to address the officer directly. "Then the Empire will lose soldiers tonight for nothing. I have already told you that I will not let you take my research, and I have shown you what stands between you and that goal. Continuing to fight will not change either of those facts." Zethral closed his 4 eyes and let out a long, slow breath. He thought about his career, about the honors he had won, about the pride he had felt commanding the elite forces of the Thraxian military, and he thought about his soldiers. Young warriors who had followed him to this moon expecting a simple mission, who did not deserve to die because their commander was too proud to admit defeat. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. The words fell like stones into water, sending ripples through the assembled soldiers. "Commander?" Rex asked, uncertain. "I said stand down," Zethral repeated more firmly, opening his eyes to meet Laura's gaze. "We are leaving this moon. All units report to the landing craft immediately and prepare for departure." The soldiers hesitated for only a moment before rushing to obey, grateful for any excuse to escape this nightmare. The Corvus watched them go, but made no move to attack, standing aside to let the Thraxians pass as they fled toward their ships within an hour. The landing craft had lifted off and returned to the warship waiting in orbit. Zethral stood at the bridge viewport once again, looking down at the green moon that had cost him so much pride. "Commander," a communications officer called out. "Imperial Command is requesting a mission report." Zethral was silent for a long moment, then turned to his console and began recording. "Imperial Command. This is Commander Zethral reporting on the Vareth 4 operation," he began, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "The mission has failed. The human research outpost remains intact, and all enemy combatants have been left unharmed." He paused, searching for words that could possibly explain what he had witnessed. "I am entering a priority warning in the Imperial database regarding this moon. Vareth 4 is to be classified as a no-entry zone, effective immediately. Threat level designation: extinction." "Commander," Rex interrupted softly, "that is the highest threat level in our system. It has never been assigned to a single planet before." "I know," Zethral said, "but after what I have seen tonight, no classification could be high enough. There is a human on that moon who commands apex predators as if they were loyal soldiers, and she let us leave when she could have destroyed us all." He entered the final line of his report with hands that still trembled. "Future missions to Vareth 4 are not recommended under any circumstances. The humans have established a presence there that cannot be challenged by conventional military force. Any attempt to do so will result in total loss of personnel." The warship turned away from the moon and jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying 200 Thraxian soldiers back to their empire with a story that no one would believe on the surface below. Laura Bennett watched the ship disappear into the stars and finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion that she had been pushing back for hours. Her legs gave out, and she sat down heavily on the ground of the outpost courtyard as the adrenaline drained from her body. Danny Holt ran toward her from the shelter where the human prisoners had been freed, his face a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Laura, are you all right?" She looked up at him with tired eyes and managed a weak smile. I think I need to sleep for about a week. Danny laughed and sat down beside her, not caring about the mud and debris that covered the ground around them. The Corvith were slowly withdrawing back into the jungle, their yellow eyes catching the first light of dawn as they returned to their territory. Rax remained beside Lara, his massive form blocking out the rising sun as he lowered his scarred head toward her. She reached up and placed her hand against his snout, feeling the warmth of his scales beneath her palm. "Thank you, old friend," she murmured in his language. "We protected our family tonight," Rax rumbled in response, a sound of contentment and pride. Ben gently nudged her shoulder before turning to follow his pack into the trees. Danny watched him go with wonder in his eyes. "I have seen you with them 100 times, but I still cannot believe it. How did you know they would help you?" Laura leaned back against a storage container and looked up at the fading stars. "I did not know," she admitted quietly. "I hoped. I believed. But I did not know for certain until Rax answered my call. That is terrifying. That is trust." Lavra corrected him gently, and trust always carries risk. I could not ask them to die for me if I was not willing to die for them. And tonight I walked into that jungle knowing that I might never walk out. She turned to look at him directly, but I also knew that running away would not save anyone. Sometimes the only choice is to stand up and hope that the people you love will stand with you. Danny was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. "The galaxy is going to hear about this. You know," he finally said, "the Thraxians will talk, and word will spread about the human woman who commands apex predators." Lavra nodded slowly. "I know. And maybe that is not such a bad thing." "What do you mean?" She smiled, a real smile this time, tired but genuine. "For too long, other species have looked at humans and seen only weakness. They see our soft skin and our short lives and our small bodies, and they think we are prey waiting to be hunted." She gestured toward the jungle where the Corvith had vanished. "But we are not weak, Danny. We are patient, we are kind, we are stubborn, and we are capable of forming bonds that cross every boundary of species and culture and biology. That is our strength, and now the galaxy has seen it above them." The sun rose fully over Vareth 4, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Laura closed her eyes and let the warmth wash over her face. Somewhere out there, stories were already spreading about the demon of Vareth, the human woman who walked among monsters. But here on this moon, there was only a scientist who had family in the most unlikely place, and a pack of apex predators who would follow her anywhere. That was the human way, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again.